This is the most Utah thing I could have ever got to see. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be telling you about my very first woofing experience. Woofing is a program where you go and work on someone's farm in exchange for a free place to stay and free food. So while I was traveling last year, this was perfect for me because one, I was truly interested in learning about farm life, and two, since I was traveling for the whole year, the more free places I had to stay, the better. So first I'm going to briefly tell you about the 3 different times that I woofed and the experience I had and some of the cool things I learned. And then I'm going to tell you a little more about things that you may want to know or look out for if you're going to try woofing. So the very first place I woofed at was in Connecticut with a retired couple, and it was my first time in Connecticut. And this was just the most perfect first time experience for a first time woofer. The couple was so nice and welcoming. They loved Noodles and welcomed him into their home. They were very flexible as far as like schedule. They cooked amazing meals. I had my own room in their home, and they were very open to including me in like their life and what they had going on. So I met a bunch of their friends and just had such a great experience with them. On the farm, we did a lot of weeding. We were planting multiple variations of potatoes. And I also had my own project of working on a raspberry bush bed that needed to be weeded and pruned. And it was kind of overgrown and growing in different weird ways. So I was kind of transplanting the raspberry bushes to just make it look better. The one thing I thought was cool was you needed some kind of like mulch to lay over everything after you planted or weeded. And they lived really close to the coast. So they would just go to the beach, and there's like a bunch of seaweed that just washes up on shore, and then they just harvest that and take it home and let it dry, and then that's what we used as mulch. Noodles loved the farm. He loved just having wide open spaces to just run around and explore. It cracked me up because normally he wants to be like right by me, and sometimes he was like, I'd be trying to weed and he's like sitting in my lap, but sometimes he would just go off on his own. And the one time I just happened to be recording him because it was cracking me up that he was so far away. And then my host had turned on the tractor, and this is what happened. Oh. This was his first time meeting goats and chickens, and he did definitely enjoy chasing them. But the one goat, it's like she held on to that memory and was like, oh, for real? You thought you were gonna chase me and get away with it? And so even when he was just like hanging out and laying down, she would always be like looking at him and like keeping her eye on him. And then when he wasn't paying attention at all and was completely off guard, she would headbutt him. It was really sad, actually. The first time she did it, it's like he was so shocked he didn't even know how to react. But then a couple days later, she did it again. And that time we were working kind of out in the field, and he just took off, and I went and followed him, and he went straight to the car and just waited there. And so I opened the door and let him go in. And like, I think I still had about like 45 minutes to an hour left of working that day. And he just sat in the car the whole time. He was like, yep, I'll just wait here. I'm done. I'm done with this. Sick of being headbutted by this goat. He learned to not chase the goats after that. But other than being headbutted by goats, he really did love it. But yeah, I had a great time. It was a great experience. The second place I went to was Minnesota, and there was actually already another woofer staying there. So it ended up being Noodles and I and her cat sharing a camper together, like an RV. Noodles did really good with that. Cat was not as happy about that situation. The camper did have electricity, so we could like charge our phone and plug in a fan, but there was no air conditioning. There was no water hooked up or anything like that. So luckily during the day we could use the host's cabin for like using the bathroom and shower. I got along very well with the other woofer and the wife. I had a wonderful experience with them and just all the different things I learned and experienced while I was there. The one thing I learned about being there was about honeyberries. Had never heard of honeyberries prior to this. The way I explain how they look is kind of like a long blueberry. And I don't really know how to describe the taste. I mean, like, I guess you could say it's close to a blueberry if I'm trying to come up with a way to describe it, but it's really just its own fruit. Like, it really has its own taste and it's delicious. The one thing we did was make honeyberry jam. So that was my first time making jam. And then we made a honeyberry jam crisp dessert kind of thing, which I'm not normally a fruit dessert kind of girl, but what I learned is that I am a jam in dessert kind of girl. Anything that needs fruit, take the fresh fruit out and replace it with jam. I said that wrong. I like fresh fruit. I like jam. I do not like baked fruit. That's what I was getting at here. And then I also put honeyberry jam on literally everything. Ice cream, waffles, stir fry, like, yeah, even savory stuff. Don't ask me why that works. It's just, yeah, I put it on everything. It was delicious. The other big project we worked on was making a hugelkultur, which is a German word, and I believe this concept comes from Germany, but it's basically a different form of like a raised garden bed, and you make it out of rotten logs and dirt, grass, hay, compost, just like all these different layers and mixtures of all that kind of stuff, and you're basically just piling it on one another, making this giant lump looking hill thing. And it's supposed to be good for like drainage, and it's supposed to make like a really healthy soil. And then my host had said it was good for squash, so we planted a bunch of different squash in there. So yeah, that's some of the things I learned on the farm. And then in our downtime, the other woofer and I explored some surrounding areas. One thing we did was went to Itasca State Park, which is where the Mississippi River starts. So some of these photos here are of me standing over the headwaters where the Mississippi River starts. We also explored a small town called Bedmidji, and Bedmidji is one of 4 towns that claim to be where Paul Bunyan is from. As a reminder, Paul Bunyan is a fictional character, so I'm not sure why there is a discrepancy on where he's from. But 3 of the towns are in Minnesota, 1 is in Maine. They all have giant statues / sculptures of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. So here's Bemidji's version of their statue. And the last place I woofed was in Salt Lake City, Utah. This was with a family actually, so they had 3 kids. I had my own separate area and my own bathroom, so that was great. And they had a bunch of large gardens on their property, so we did a lot of weeding as well, planting. They also have a farm stand that they put out in front of their house once a week. So we would cut flowers out of their garden to make bouquets. The wife would make bread. We had jelly that we'd made, and then other vegetables that were available from the garden, they'd sell those. So I helped put that together. We also had picked a bunch of cherries and then juiced those and then made that into jelly. So I had like a day or 2 of making like tons and tons of batches of cherry jelly, which was great. I actually am like looking forward to making jelly and jam in the future. Now that I've learned how to do it and have practiced doing it, I would love to like be creative in making different flavors. One interesting thing I learned here. So my first day they told me we're not going to spray this year. So, you know, no chemicals, which hearing that, your initial reaction is like, cool, no chemicals. That's great. Okay, but so, you know, the reason we use chemicals is because, you know, bugs. Well, that's one of the reasons people use them. So since they weren't spraying, then the other thing you had to worry about was bugs. They had these things called squash bugs, and squash bugs can literally kill your plant overnight. So like today, your plant can look normal and great, and tomorrow when you wake up, it could be completely dead. So we'd have to take time to find squash bugs and kill them. So the first time we did this, the husband at this point was actually out of town. So it was the wife and I and her youngest son, who the son like loved hunting for squash bugs. Like this was fun to him. And so I said in the beginning, I was like, oh, and are we able to just like, when we find them, like put them in a bucket of water? And she was like, no, they don't die that way. So her and her son were finding the bugs, putting them in a bucket. And then I literally had a giant stick, and then I had to smash them in the bucket. And literally the wife was like, I'm so sorry. I know this is not what you pictured when you knew you were coming here to work on our farm. You know, I'm like, I'll do whatever I need to do. Like, I'm here to help. So this is what you need help doing. Okay. But I also hate bugs. So it was like so gross. And then the next day we went outside to work on stuff again. And she was like, oh, and I talked to my husband last night and I'm so sorry. But he said, we actually can just put them in a bucket of soapy water. So all the smashing was for nothing. And then in our downtime, we went on a hike, and this was in July. And so that area in the summer, they have like beautiful wildflowers that grow everywhere. So that was just absolutely gorgeous with like the mountains and the flowers. So pretty. We also went to like one of the suburb towns, had like a festival weekend thing going on that they do every year with like, you know, food, vendors, games, concerts, like that kind of thing. And Donny Osmond's son was performing, and Donny Osmond actually came out and performed a couple songs with his son. I was just like, this is the most Utah thing I could have ever got to see while I was in Utah, is Donny Osmond performing at a local show. So those are the 3 specific experiences I had, and I just loved it so much. Literally all the people I stayed with, loved them, had great experiences, great time just meeting new people, learning completely different things at all 3 farms. And you pay for the like a year membership, but I'm pretty sure I paid $40 for the entire year. That is it for part 1. Make sure you come back next week for part 2, where I'll be going over some advice, recommendations, things to consider if you're wanting to woof or just learn more about woofing in general. So make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss that. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.